I'm a little overwhelmed with these guys being in the scene and not being Tim Taylor, but it's a bit intimidating because I learned a bunch of acting from these.
Home Improvement was more than a sitcom. It was America's Saturday night tradition and the show that made Tim Allen a star. But behind the laughter, the set was a pressure cooker. Creative clashes, personal exhaustion, and simmering tensions threatened to derail the show entirely. And now, we finally know why Tim Allen and Patricia Richardson walked away from the very empire they helped create: the rise of home improvement. In the crowded landscape of early 90s television, Home Improvement didn't just find an audience, it stole the hearts of every family. The show was a rare blend of slapstick humor, family dynamics, and cultural commentary, all anchored by the unlikely charisma of Tim Allen. The show's concept was born from Allen's stand-up comedy career, where he leaned heavily into themes of masculinity, fatherhood, and the absurdity of do-it-yourself home repairs. His toolman persona, a loud, overconfident guy who believed every problem could be solved with more power, was the blueprint for Tim Taylor, the fictional host of a cable show called Tool Time. The show was created by Carmen Finestra, David McFadden, and Matt Williams, who saw something fresh in Allen's act and built a sitcom around it. The show wasn't just about tools and testosterone. It was about the chaos of family life, the tension between tradition and change, and the humor that lives in everyday moments. Casting was critical. Patricia Richardson was brought in as Jill Taylor, Tim's intelligent and grounded wife. Originally, the role had gone to Frances Fisher, but test audiences felt her performance was too serious for the show's tone. Richardson struck the perfect balance: sharp, warm, and believable. Her chemistry with Allen gave the show its emotional core, and their dynamic felt authentic, a marriage built on love, frustration, and mutual respect. The Taylor children, Brad, Randy, and Mark, played by Zachary Ty Bryan, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and Taryn Noah Smith, added depth and relatability to the show. Brad was athletic and impulsive, Randy was clever and sarcastic, and Mark was sensitive and often overlooked. Their storylines tackled everything from sibling rivalry to growing pains, giving the show a broader emotional range. Richard Karn also joined the cast as Al Borland, Tim's loyal co-host on Tool Time. Karn wasn't the original choice, as Stephen Tobolowsky had been cast but had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts. Karn's understated performance and dry humor made Al a fan favorite. He was also the steady hand next to Tim's chaos, often serving as the voice of reason and the butt of Tim's jokes. There was also Wilson, the neighbor whose face was always hidden behind a fence but whose wisdom was never out of reach. Played by Earl Hindman, Wilson became one of the show's most iconic characters. His advice, often drawn from obscure cultures and historical figures, added a layer of depth that balanced the show's humor, and his attempts to interpret Wilson's insights, usually with hilarious results, became a recurring highlight. Home Improvement premiered on ABC on September 17, 1991, and it became an instant hit. Week after week, it ranked among the top 10 most-watched shows in America, and audiences connected with its blend of physical comedy, relatable family moments, and subtle social commentary. The show earned 7 Primetime Emmy nominations and multiple People's Choice Awards. By 1996, it had generated over $500 million in syndication revenue, a staggering figure that reflected its widespread appeal. It evolved from a hit TV show into a cultural phenomenon, a brand in its own right, complete with merchandise spanning tools, apparel, and video games, all fueled by iconic catchphrases like "more power," that firmly embedded home improvement in pop culture. Tim Allen's signature grunt became instantly recognizable, and the show's themes resonated with viewers across generations. The success of Home Improvement also launched Allen's film career. While still starring in the show, he took on major roles in The Santa Claus, released in 1994, and Toy Story in 1995, both of which became massive hits. Suddenly, Allen wasn't just a sitcom star, he was a household name with a presence in both television and film. But as the show climbed higher, the pressure behind the scenes began to build. The cast was growing older, the creative energy was shifting, and Tim Allen began to feel boxed in by the very character that had made him famous. Fame's hidden cost. Home Improvement was a ratings powerhouse, but behind the scenes, its cast faced personal battles that Fame only intensified. The show's success brought visibility and wealth, but it also exposed its stars to addiction, legal trouble, emotional strain, and fractured relationships. Before Home Improvement, Tim Allen's life had already taken a dramatic turn. In 1978, he was arrested at a Michigan airport with 650 grams of illicit substances. He was faced with life imprisonment charges but cooperated with authorities, resulting in a sentence of just over 2 years in federal prison. That experience shaped his path towards stand-up comedy and eventually television, but it remained a defining part of his public image. But the struggles didn't end there. During the show's run, Allen was arrested again in 1997 for driving under the influence. The incident occurred while Home Improvement was still airing, and it forced him to confront his ongoing battle with alcohol addiction. He entered rehab shortly after, acknowledging the need for recovery while continuing to lead one of the most watched shows on television. Allen's personal life also came under scrutiny, which put his marriage under strain. Tabloids constantly speculated about infidelity and emotional distance, and although Allen rarely addressed these rumors publicly, the pressure of maintaining a public persona while managing private challenges added another layer of stress. Despite these issues, Allen remained committed to the show. He continued filming while navigating legal and personal setbacks, but the emotional toll was evident. Fame had elevated his career, but it also magnified every misstep. Taron Noah Smith, who played the youngest Taylor son Mark, had a complicated relationship with Fame. At age 17, he sued his parents over control of his $1.5 million trust fund, alleging they had misused his earnings from the show. The lawsuit drew national attention and highlighted the challenges of child stardom. Smith later revealed that he felt disconnected from the show's success. He described feeling exploited and out of place, saying he never truly related to the fame surrounding Home Improvement. After the show ended, he left acting entirely and pursued a quieter life, distancing himself from the industry that had shaped his adolescence. Zachary Ty Bryan, who played Brad Taylor, faced serious legal trouble as an adult. In 2020, he was arrested for domestic maltreatment, but it didn't end there. In 2023, he was arrested again, this time for felony assault and driving under the influence. These incidents stood in stark contrast to his clean-cut image on the show and raised concerns about the long-term effects of early fame. After the show, Bryan made several attempts to break into production. However, with just minor acting roles available, he struggled to regain the visibility he once had. His legal issues prompted renewed scrutiny of the pressures faced by child actors and the lack of support systems available to them after fame fades. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, on the other hand, became a teen idol during the show's peak. His intelligence, charm, and comedic timing made him a standout, and he quickly became one of the most recognizable faces of the 90s. But the attention came with emotional consequences. Thomas reportedly dealt with anxiety and found Hollywood's environment isolating. He described the industry as weird and said it was difficult to connect with peers. The constant spotlight and expectations wore on him, and by season 8, he made the decision to leave the show to focus on his education. His departure surprised fans and frustrated cast members. However, Thomas maintained that his decision was about personal growth. He later attended Harvard and Columbia, choosing privacy and education over continued fame. Meanwhile, Patricia Richardson, who played Jill Taylor, the show's emotional anchor, brought depth and realism to a role that could have easily been reduced to a sitcom stereotype. But behind the scenes, she was juggling far more than scripts and rehearsals. Richardson was married to actor Ray Baker from 1982 until their divorce in 1995, right in the middle of Home Improvement's peak. At the same time, she was raising 3 children while filming a hit television series. The demands of balancing motherhood with a high-profile acting career were so intense that Richardson later said she felt exhausted and overwhelmed by the constant pressure to perform both at work and at home. She also dealt with creative frustration. She wanted Jill to be portrayed with more depth and complexity, but producers often resisted. Her push for meaningful storylines was met with hesitation, and she felt the show was becoming repetitive. The cast's personal struggles didn't derail Home Improvement's success, but they added complexity to its legacy. Fame had elevated their careers, but it also exposed them to scrutiny, burnout, and conflict. Behind the polished performances were real people navigating intense pressure, and for many, the cost of success was far greater than it appeared. But the emotional toll wasn't limited to individual struggles. As the show progressed, the cast began to feel the weight of long production schedules, public expectations, and the challenge of maintaining creative momentum. What had started as a lighthearted sitcom was now a high-stakes enterprise, and the pressure to keep it successful affected everyone involved. The cast was growing older, the energy was shifting, and the cracks beneath the surface were becoming harder to ignore. Behind-the-scenes tensions. As Home Improvement continued its successful run, cracks began to form behind the scenes. The show's lighthearted tone masked a growing sense of creative fatigue, interpersonal strain, and unresolved conflict among key cast members. One of the most talked-about tensions involved Tim Allen and Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Thomas's decision to leave the show during Season 8 to focus on his education caught many by surprise, including Allen. While Thomas's departure was framed as a personal choice, Allen reportedly admitted he was mad about how it happened. He felt Thomas had left abruptly and failed to communicate clearly with the cast and crew, and the disappointment lingered. The tension wasn't just professional, it became personal. Thomas did not return for the series finale, a decision that reportedly deepened the rift. Allen had hoped for a reunion to close out the show, but Thomas declined. Their relationship reportedly remained strained for years, and while both have spoken respectfully about each other in later interviews, the emotional distance was never fully resolved. Tim Allen also had a complicated working relationship with Patricia Richardson. As the show's co-leads, their on-screen chemistry was undeniable, but off-screen, things weren't always smooth. Richardson later revealed that she and Allen had creative disagreements throughout the series. She described Allen as difficult at times, particularly when it came to decisions about character development and story direction. Richardson was deeply invested in portraying Jill Taylor as a strong, multi-dimensional character. She pushed back against scripts that leaned too heavily into stereotypes or reduced her role to comic relief. Allen, meanwhile, had his own vision for the show, one that often prioritized humor and his character's central role. These differing perspectives led to friction, especially in the later seasons when the show's tone began to shift. Beyond cast dynamics, the writing team faced its own challenges. By Season 7, keeping the show fresh had become increasingly difficult. The original premise, centered around family life and DIY mishaps, had been thoroughly explored. Writers struggled to find new angles that felt authentic and engaging. Storylines became repetitive, and the show's momentum slowed. Tim Allen, aware of the stagnation, reportedly wanted more control over the direction of the series. He had ideas about evolving the show's themes and expanding its scope, but those ideas didn't always align with the producer's vision. The push for creative input led to tension between Allen and the production team. While he remained committed to the show, the behind-the-scenes negotiations became more complex. These internal struggles weren't visible to viewers, but they influenced the energy on set. The show's success had created high expectations, and meeting those expectations became harder with each season. While the team remained professional, the atmosphere was no longer as light as it had been in the early years. By the time the final season was underway, it was clear that Home Improvement was nearing its end, not just because of ratings or contracts, but because the people behind it were ready to move on. The tension, while not explosive, had built up quietly over time. It shaped decisions, influenced performances, and ultimately played a role in how the show concluded. The show's controversies. Home Improvement was a merchandising machine and a cultural touchstone. But beneath its success, the show faced a steady stream of criticism and controversy, some during its original run, others that surfaced years later. These issues didn't derail the show, but they did complicate its legacy. One of the most persistent critiques centered on the show's portrayal of gender roles. Tim Taylor's character was built around exaggerated masculinity. He was loud, impulsive, and obsessed with power tools. His catchphrase, "more power," became iconic, but it also symbolized a broader theme that critics found troubling. Tim's bumbling behavior was often played for laughs, while Jill, his wife, was cast in the role of the nagging spouse who had to rein him in. This dynamic, while common in sitcoms of the era, drew criticism for reinforcing outdated stereotypes. Tim's incompetence was treated as harmless, even endearing, while Jill's frustration was often dismissed or mocked. Some viewers saw this as a reflection of real-life gender dynamics, but others argued it perpetuated a narrow view of masculinity and domestic life. Over time, the show's comedic framing of these roles began to feel out of step with evolving cultural conversations. Even Tool Time, the fictional show within the show, wasn't immune to scrutiny. While it was clearly satirical, some episodes were criticized for promoting unsafe DIY practices. Tim's frequent mishaps, exploding appliances, misused tools, and reckless modifications were meant to be funny, but they occasionally crossed into territory that concerned safety advocates. The humor relied on exaggeration, but the line between parody and irresponsibility wasn't always clear. The show was beloved for its humor and heart, but it also reflected and sometimes reinforced cultural norms that later came under fire. Its cast members, once symbols of wholesome entertainment, became reminders of the personal and professional costs that often accompany public success. And as these tensions and criticisms accumulated, one question became harder to ignore. If Home Improvement was so successful, why did it end? Patricia Richardson's side of the story. By the late 1990s, Home Improvement had cemented its place as one of the most successful sitcoms of the decade. It had dominated ratings, launched careers, and become a fixture in American pop culture. So when the show ended after its 8th season, many fans were left wondering, why walk away from something so successful? While Tim Allen was the face of Home Improvement, Patricia Richardson was its emotional backbone. As Jill Taylor, she brought intelligence, warmth, and realism to a role that could have easily been reduced to a sitcom stereotype. But behind the scenes, Richardson's experience was far more complex. And when the show ended after season 8, her decision to walk away wasn't just about career moves, it was personal. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, Richardson made it clear she was done. After 8 seasons of balancing a demanding filming schedule with raising 3 children, she felt the show had run its course. The idea of continuing just for the paycheck didn't appeal to her. She said, "I told everybody there's not enough money in the world to get me to do a 9th year. This show is over. It needs to end." Her decision came at a time when ABC was eager to renew the show for a 9th season. The network reportedly offered Tim Allen $50 million to return. Richardson was offered half that, $25 million. While still a substantial sum, the disparity struck a nerve. Richardson called the offer insulting, pointing out that she was working hard too. She had carried equal weight in the show's success, and the pay gap reflected a broader issue of gender inequality in Hollywood. And so Richardson requested equal pay with Tim Allen as her only condition to do a 9th season of the show, a request the producers turned down. She later said, "I knew that Disney would in no way pay me that much. That was my way to say no, and was a little bit of a flip-off to Disney. I'd been there all this time, and they never even paid me a third of what Tim was making, and I was working my off. I was a big reason why women were watching." In another interview, she went on to say, "Yeah, I would have liked to have had the $25 million, but I already made a lot of money from Home Improvement. I made enough to live well for the rest of my life without working. I knew I'd want to work anyway." But the financial offer wasn't the only factor. Richardson had grown increasingly frustrated with the creative direction of the show. By season 8, she felt the storylines were becoming repetitive and less meaningful. The early seasons had explored real family dynamics and emotional depth, but the later episodes leaned more heavily into formulaic humor. For Richardson, the shift was noticeable and disappointing. She also wanted more for Jill Taylor. Over the years, Richardson had advocated for her character to be portrayed with greater complexity. She pushed for storylines that showed Jill's personal growth, her career ambitions, and her emotional struggles. But producers were hesitant. The show's formula revolved around Tim's antics, and Jill's role often defaulted to the voice of reason or the foil to his chaos. Richardson felt that limiting Jill's development was a missed opportunity. These creative differences added to her decision to leave. She didn't want to continue playing a character who wasn't evolving, especially when the show itself seemed to be losing its original spark. And so, Richardson's departure wasn't abrupt. It was deliberate, thoughtful, and rooted in a desire to protect both her personal life and professional integrity. When the series' final episode aired on May 25, 1999, Richardson was present. However, she later expressed regret about how it was handled. She once confessed that Tim Allen remained angry at her over her decision to leave the show, saying, "He had never really forgiven me for not wanting to do the 9th year. He loved Tim Taylor. Tim Taylor was this happily married man with his great boys and great life, and so he wanted that show to go on forever." Patricia also felt the finale could have been more emotionally satisfying and inclusive of all characters. The absence of Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who had left the show earlier, was noticeable. Richardson believed the ending should have honored the full journey of the Taylor family, not just the central storyline. For Richardson, life after Home Improvement was quieter but more fulfilling. She continued acting in smaller roles and focused on her family. Her experience on the show had been both rewarding and exhausting, and stepping away gave her the space to recalibrate. In interviews, she's spoken candidly about the challenges of working in television while raising children, and how the demands of fame can overshadow personal well-being. While the show is often remembered for its humor and cultural impact, behind the scenes were sacrifices, frustrations, and decisions that aren't always visible to the audience. But Richardson's reason for leaving the show is only half the story. While it was a statement about priorities, fairness, and creative integrity, Tim Allen's perspective on why the show ended is quite different. Tim Allen's perspective. Tim Allen, the face of the series, had a different reason for leaving the show. He later revealed that he wanted to end the show on a high note. After 8 seasons, he felt the series had reached its creative peak. The stories had been told, the characters had evolved, and the energy that once fueled the show was beginning to fade. Allen admitted he was working hard and sensed that continuing might lead to burnout, not just for him, but for the entire team. That sense of creative fatigue wasn't unique to Allen. The writers had been grappling with the challenge of keeping the show fresh since season 7. The original premise had been thoroughly explored. Finding new angles that felt authentic and engaging was becoming increasingly difficult. Allen, who had taken on more creative input in the later seasons, recognized that pushing forward without a clear direction could compromise the show's quality. ABC, however, wasn't ready to let go. The network was eager to renew Home Improvement for a 9th season. Hence, they offered Allen a staggering $50 million to stay on, a sum he declined. For Allen, the decision wasn't just about the money. He said continuing without Richardson, who had already made up her mind to leave the show, wouldn't feel right. Their on-screen chemistry had been central to the show's success, and the idea of replacing her or reshaping the family dynamic didn't sit well with him. Their mutual decision to decline the renewal offer marked a turning point. Without its 2 leads, the show couldn't continue in its original form. ABC considered spin-off ideas and alternate formats, but none gained traction. The cast and crew began preparing for a final season that would bring closure to the characters and the audience. Ending the show was a strategic move for Allen. He wanted to preserve Home Improvement's legacy rather than risk a decline in quality. Many long-running sitcoms had stumbled in their later seasons, stretching storylines and losing the spark that made them special. Allen didn't want Home Improvement to follow that path. By stepping away at the right time, he ensured the show would be remembered for its strengths, not its missteps. The show's finale was a heartfelt send-off that honored the show's themes and gave fans a sense of resolution. The episode drew over 35 million viewers, a testament to the show's enduring popularity. After Home Improvement, Allen took time to recalibrate. He continued his film career with projects like Galaxy Quest and the Santa Claus sequels, but television eventually called him back. In 2011, he returned to the sitcom format with Last Man Standing, a show that echoed many of Home Improvement's themes, including family, masculinity, and generational clashes, but with a more modern sensibility. In Last Man Standing, Alan played Mike Baxter, a conservative outdoor goods executive navigating life with his wife and 3 daughters. The show tackled contemporary issues while maintaining the comedic tone that had defined Alan's earlier work. It ran for 9 seasons, proving that Alan's appeal hadn't faded and that audiences still connected with the kind of storytelling he helped pioneer. While Last Man Standing stood on its own, it often nodded to Home Improvement, guest appearances, subtle references, and even a crossover episode featuring Richard Karn reminded fans of the legacy Alan had built. The show served as both a continuation and a reflection, a way for Alan to revisit familiar territory while adapting to a new era. Recently, there have been rumors about a possible Home Improvement reboot or reunion. Tim Allen has said he's open to the idea, but Patricia Richardson has made it clear she won't be involved. In an interview, she said, "I would hear Tim was coming out publicly and saying this stuff about how everyone was on board to do a Home Improvement reunion, but he never asked me, and he never asked Jonathan, who I talked to. So I called Jonathan one day and said, 'Has he asked you about this?' And he went, 'No, and why is he going around telling everybody that we're all on board when he hasn't talked to you or me? It's not going to be a show at all. And people think we can just magically go right back to who we were 30 years ago and do a show that was 30 years ago. And we've all changed quite a bit, I think, since then. It would be very weird.'" In hindsight, ending Home Improvement when they did was a rare example of a show exiting gracefully. It didn't overstay its welcome, didn't dilute its impact, and didn't compromise its identity. The decision to walk away at the height of its success preserved its reputation and allowed its cast to move forward on their own terms. Tim Allen, in later interviews, acknowledged the emotional toll that fame had taken on everyone involved. He admitted that the pressures of maintaining a hit show, combined with personal struggles, had made the final seasons challenging. Allen said he was proud of the show's impact, but also glad he walked away when he did. The decision to end Home Improvement was mutual, and while it left fans wanting more, it allowed the cast to move on without compromising the show's legacy. Do you think Home Improvement ended too soon? Drop your answers in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.